everyone, and welcome to the Wrestling Academy, a podcast all about wrestling history with no linear timeline or trackable syllabus. So if you're a lifelong fan or you're brand new, this is the podcast for you. I am Samee Junio, your Homecoming King.
And I am the headmaster of Wrestling Academy. My name is Michael Classic, and I am a certified G and a bona fide thug, and you can't teach that. Right before we started rolling, I was like, let's not do it. And then I did it anyway, and here we are.
I love it.
But something I want to talk to I want to hard pivot away from this.
Yeah.
Samee.
Yes.
You know, we're a young, hungry, up-and-coming podcast.
Very hungry.
And we have set a goal for ourselves of trying to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube,
True.
or you can get to YouTube and subscribe to us, we would really appreciate it. And as our gift to you, if we reach 1,000 subscribers, Samee Junio, your Homecoming King, will put me through a table, literally for real. After doing the research for this week's episode, I think we're both juiced to get some. Yeah, we're both excited to inflict.
God, I regret it. I regret it.
Yeah, we're more eager than ever to inflict violence on one another, but not until we get 1,000 subscribers. So
we're really edging ourselves until you guys help us out by following us on YouTube.
I'm just gonna call it out, Samee. It feels like we're off the rails.
I think where we are mentally is an absolute indication of all of the wild stuff that we had to watch as research for this episode. So I feel like, to be fully transparent and really connect with our audience, we should let them see what the research has done to us.
Yeah, I guess in the look, let's just get into it. Today we're going to be talking all about a specific match type, exploding barbed wire death matches.
Oh, man.
Me and Samee just drank deep from the cup of madness, and my head's spinning because we're covering a very crazy specific type of match.
Yeah, so here we are. We're going to talk to you guys about exploding barbed wire death matches. And geez, where do we begin? Michael, what's your relationship with exploding barbed wire death matches?
For me, I feel like exploding barbed wire death matches are one of those things that when you're a wrestling fan and you're just going about your travels as a fan, researching stuff, falling down rabbit holes, getting excited, checking things out, there are always these matches that feel like the boogeyman to a certain extent, where, you know, you hear about things, or, you know, maybe you see just a crazy snippet of a video. Maybe it's grainy camcorder footage of somebody in a backyard wrestling match going through a flaming table, but then accidentally gets set on fire for real. Or you watch a copy of a copy of a copy of a match where somebody just blades somebody way too extensively and they just, just start pouring blood. You see stuff like that. And to me, exploding barbed wire death matches are a thing that I've heard about, and I would always hear stories or see snippets of YouTube videos of people talking about being in matches or having seen the matches, and it really just got super built up in my head. And now that we have a podcast where we do deep dives on topics in wrestling that we find really interesting, I really wanted to get in and see if I could demystify these matches for myself and be like, all right, well, let's actually watch some. Let's actually see what they're all about and see if they're as crazy as they've been reported to me. And spoiler alert, I think they're pretty crazy. in a different way than I was anticipating, though. So I'm really excited to dig in and talk more about it. But Samee, you're relatively new to wrestling. So what is your experience with exploding barbed wire death matches?
I'm going to not explode myself here and tell you that I was on Twitter, brag, and I came across this really epic photo of Maki Ito with exploding barbed wire bat, and I immediately sent it to you, and you replied and were like, oh, yes, we have to do an episode on exploding barbed wire death matches. So from that moment until I literally started research for this episode, I thought an exploding barbed wire death match was just a match between two people who had those exploding barbed wire bats. So my relationship to exploding barbed wire death matches was just covered in confusion. And I'm still confused now.
You went from, oh, I think I know what we're talking about, a weapon, right? And then to, wait, this exists, all in the course of a couple of days. Has been pretty remarkable to see you have to learn a lot of things really quickly.
To be confused about this particular thing is just foolish, but we're here now and we're ready. And let's tell the people who may be thinking that we're talking about exploding barbed wire bats about exploding barbed wire death match stipulations.
Sammy's correct. So this is it's what's called a gimmick match or a stipulation match. So it's a very specific, heightened version of a normal match. So normally when you go and see a match, Sammy, one person versus one person, they wrestle, somebody gets a pinfall victory, 3 count, they win the match. And so other times there are different kinds of gimmicks or stipulations. So it's like a cage match is something like that. A hardcore match is something like that. A Hell in a Cell, Royal Rumble. These are all stipulations where the rules of the matches change a little bit. And exploding barbed wire death matches are no exception. So let's break it down. We'll take it a little bit by a little bit. We see 2 things. We see death match. We see barbed wire match. A death match is a heightened, violent, like violence-centric match. So we go beyond just where weapons are not only encouraged, but that's sort of the point. The point is to enact excessive, extreme violence on your opponent. So you are absolutely going to see blood, you're going to see weapons, barbed wire gets in the mix, sometimes fire gets in the mix, sometimes screwdrivers get in the mix. It's really how far can you push the violence aspect while an audience is watching. Okay. Then a barbed wire match is a different stipulation where you take away the ring ropes on the ring itself and you replace those ropes with barbed wire.
Oh,
in our Terry Funk episode, we talk a little bit in more detail about a very infamous barbed wire match between Terry Funk and Sabu. You put those 2 things together, right? It is a death match where the ring ropes are surrounded by barbed wire. And then you add an extra element of, if you even touch the barbed wire, it is rigged to explode. And so I think it sounds a little bit more violent than it is when you see it in practice, because it's sort of like fireworks going off. So it's like somebody getting hit with like a ton of firecrackers, where it's like it hurt. It looks like it hurts. It looks like it burns, but it's not like,
it's not an actual like explosion. It's not C4 as it's like written,
exactly
as it's described on the internet. It's like, oh yeah, C4 is rigged on these barbed wire, but it's actually just like a
pop, pop, pop. Yeah, and it's very flashy. It's very theatrical. It looks like it hurts a ton. And you see guys get burned and have burn marks and soot all over them. So it's definitely causing damage, but I think it's sort of, it's pitched one way. And I think it evokes a lot of imagery in your mind that might not necessarily be the case when you see it. So there's a way to elevate the match even further, Sammy.
No
and
way.
There is it's called I believe a countdown exploding barbed wire death match. And what that means is there is a countdown clock running over the entire match. So 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But when that countdown timer hits 0, the ring will explode. No matter who's in it, no matter if there's even a match going on. So you're supposed to beat your opponent and get out of there before the timer hits 0. So even if you beat your opponent, the ring could still explode. And spoiler alert, we're going to see 2 instances of that happening this episode.
Do you see now why we're a little shaky?
So we've just been watching little theatrical explosions, buckets of blood, tons of barbed wire. It's been pretty brutal. So I want to take maybe a little bit more of a scholarly approach to get into because when I first heard about this, I was like, what the hell is it? Where did this even come from? Like, this all sounds so crazy. Like, how did we get to this specific mix of ingredients? And so I tried to do a little bit of research, like we've done for other match types, to be like, okay, what's like the history of barbed wire? What's like the history of death matches? And unfortunately, this style of wrestling was really hard to pin down, because I sort of think that it's almost impossible to figure out who started doing hardcore wrestling first, because it seems like such a no-brainer, right? Where you're like, oh, we're wrestling, and then somebody uses a weapon. That's pretty crazy. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't think there's a specific instance of that happening, because I think it's just such an easy to grab idea in something like wrestling that it's probably been around since the very beginning. But what I found was a lot of people point to promotions in Puerto Rico, like Capital Sports promotions in the 70s and 80s. They might not necessarily have been the people who invented using a foreign object in a match, but they definitely popularized it. And they definitely popularized a lot of the more violent spectacle matches. So they did a lot of weapons in their matches. They would have a lot of blood. They would have a lot of fire elements in their matches. And then they would also bring in outside talent from all over the world. So they would come in, do some of these, more extreme matches, and then they would go back to their own territories, probably with a bunch of crazy new ideas that they could do. And so I think that's sort of where the idea was popularized, not necessarily invented. And then I tried to find the history of barbed wire matches, and that was fell down so many rabbit holes on Reddit of people saying that, it was invented in the 1800s in France or something like that, but I couldn't find any evidence of that really.
France.
That's what I heard.
All right.
It was. I think what they said is it was a much like a cage match. It was a chicken coop razor wire cage match.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So it was something like that, but I couldn't find any evidence of it when I looked for it myself. But what I could find is somebody had a printout of a newspaper article going all the way back to Texas in 1956, advertising a barbed wire ring rope match. So all I can say for sure is the idea of using barbed wire in wrestling matches has been around for a very, very long time. So everything I could find in regards to hardcore matches, death matches, razor barbed wire matches, I couldn't find anybody who out and out invented it, but what I could find were people who popularized it. So if we want to talk about who popularized exploding barbed wire death matches, we can look firmly at a promotion called Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling, FMW for short. So FMW was a wrestling promotion based in Japan that started in 1989, and it specialized in these extreme violent spectacle matches.
Yeah, so Michael, when we started research for this episode, you sent me a text, and it was from when you started watching the Dark Side of the Ring episode on FMW. And it just says, I challenge you to an electrified pool match. And then I immediately said, haha, I accept. What I didn't mention is that I thought electrified pool match meant we would play billiards and the pool cues would shock us when we missed a shot. I don't know why I spent so much time so confused about what was going on for this.
So unfortunately, Samee,
yeah,
had nothing to do with a specific object, and it was more a specific style of match. So
great.
When I watched this Dark Side of the Ring, they got to an electrified pool match, and basically they had built a lake, or like a man-made lake or Olympic-sized swimming pool, and they built an island, and they took jet skis out to this island, and then they fought each other. And basically, if you got thrown off of the island into the water, there would be these theatrical explosions that would happen. And it was like, oh yeah, you just got thrown in electrified water. What?
It's fucking ridiculous. It's basically they just dropped a hair blow dryer into the water and be like, all right, wrestle around it. I wanted to kind of give us the task of creating our own FMW type matches. Do you want me to start? We can trade off. Okay, so my first insane FMW style crazy stipulation match, the floor is lava.
I'm assuming we pour actual hot lava on the floor, and if you touch it, you get burned?
Yes, but also that would actually probably kill somebody. So the floor is lava, but it would be hot coals, and there would be platforms and stuff.
Oh yeah, much safer. Much safer.
Yeah, much safer. No death. No big deal.
Okay, my first idea that instantly came to mind was an exploding bungee rope match.
Oh,
You would both be up at the top, and you would be
Mm-hmm.
hooked into your bungee device.
Okay.
And then you would do a full wrestling match. And the whole point was to throw your opponent off a bridge or something. And then when they fall and the bungee goes taut, it's rigged to explode, dude.
What? So they die?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so you're taking deathmatch very seriously.
Yeah, I think so. What else you got? What are the
Okay.
stipulations you got? Hit me with another
right.
FMW.
Cage of thumbtacks! Exclamation point. So every 3 minutes, a huge bag of thumbtacks is emptied into the ring, and it is a cage with no roof. So it's just 4 walls, and the only way to win is the classic get outside of the cage before your opponent does. So the longer the match goes on, the more the floor is covered in thumbtacks.
Here's my second one.
Gun match.
A bazooka match, dude. No. So this match is called a snakes on a plane match.
No.
Where the match takes place over the course of a flight. So there is a 1 hour time limit. And once the plane takes off, a bunch of poisonous snakes are released. But here's the thing, you're fighting for one single antidote.
Oh my god.
So the winner gets the antidote.
Oh my god.
So you're wrestling, you're searching the plane, and you only win when you get the antidote.
And your opponent will die.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this is the kind of stuff that FMW was known for. And FMW went through a few different iterations over the years. It ran from 1989 to 1995, and that was sort of its initial run, where the promotion was ostensibly built around its founder, a straight-up wild man named Atsushi Onita.
So who is Atsushi Onita? Atsushi is a semi-retired wrestler, and I found out, 10 minutes before we started recording, that he had an exploding barbed wire death match last year. So he's like hardly retired.
Yeah, he's got to work a lighter schedule of only doing a few exploding barbed wire death matches a year.
Just nuts. All right. So this guy had his in-ring debut at All Japan Pro Wrestling in 1974 and was actually the first person to graduate from the All Japan Pro Wrestling dojo. Atsushi started out under the wing of All Japan's founder, Giant Baba, who we've mentioned before. So Atsushi, even though he's, very linked to deathmatch style wrestling, he didn't start out that way. He was basically just a regular wrestler on his way to being a high flyer until he was sent out on excursion with his tag team partner, Masanobu Fuchi.
So something that happens a lot with wrestlers in Japan specifically is they send a lot of their students and their trainees out on what Samee calls excursions. So they go to different promotions, different territories all over the world. And so that's just a way to get a little more seasoning, a little more experience. So when Onita goes to America, he goes down south to the Texas promotions, where you'll remember from the start of the episode we were talking. That's where I saw those barbed wire matches advertised. So we are in barbed wire, crazy sort of southern hardcore brawling stuff, and that is where he meets Terry Funk.
And so Atsushi was as enamored by Terry Funk and his style of wrestling as we all are. And it seemed like Terry was also pretty fond of Atsushi. And the legend is that Terry bought Atsushi a used car while he was down there, which, I haven't called wrestling cute in a while, so I will here. Wrestling's real cute, you guys.
Unfortunately, can't get around it. It's cute.
It's super cute. Onita's first hardcore bout was in Memphis, Tennessee at Continental Wrestling Association, September 4th, 1981, at Tupelo Concession Stand Brawl number 2. So the match was Eddie Gilbert, Ricky Morton, Masafuchi, and Atsushi Onita. I watched this match. It's pretty wild. If you're like me, and if you're wondering right now if somebody gets attacked with nacho cheese in this concession stand brawl, you will be delighted to hear that somebody does get attacked with nacho cheese during this match. It's Fuchi who gets cheesed, and it's this match is such a wild watch. And if you ever want to redefine food fight, hop on over to YouTube and watch this match.
It was really funny. This match is, look, I'm going to be straight up with you. It takes place in 1981. So
Yeah.
it's a totally different time of wrestling. They're wrestling in a lot different style. But at the end of the day, what you're going to see is some grainy footage of two good old boys getting thrown into a concession stand in Tupelo, getting their asses kicked. And then, food gets involved. It's very funny and very wild. But honestly, as crazy as this match was, it was super important in Onita's development as a wrestler because he saw firsthand just how enamored the audience was with these huge violent spectacles. People were responding to them more than they would during a traditional match. And I mean, we can both attest, we've been to some pretty crazy hardcore matches live, and that's just a totally different energy when you're in the ring watching it happen.
Yeah, you can't help but get really like swept up in the moment, and I don't know if it's just our bodies going into fight or flight mode or whatever, but actually in this concession stand brawl, Atsushi credits some woman who gets so caught up in the violence of the match that she actually kicks his face open just because she's like overly excited about what was happening, and he starts bleeding, and that's like the moment where it really clicked in that he recognized that ultra violent match people are way more hype about.
This is the kind of guy you're dealing with. This dude takes a stiletto to the face and is like, I'm onto something here. Like, that's so wild. That's the guy we're dealing with. That is who Onita is.
So, high off violence, Atsushi returns to Japan with a plan to bring hardcore wrestling with him. But it doesn't happen right away. Unfortunately, he gets super injured, but not inside a wrestling match. He gets injured in 1985 and has to step away from wrestling for a long while. And it's in 1988, good year, that Onita decides to challenge a legitimate karate champion, Masashi Aoyagi. They clashed 2 times, but the second time, Onita was disqualified for using wrestling moves during the match. And he was so driven to fight this guy that he started his own promotion just so they could fight with no rules. So it's kind of this thing where Atsushi gets caught up by getting hit with the stiletto and seeing the crowd's reaction to what's going on in the ring. And this is kind of the same type of energy that's coming at him when he's fighting Masashi, where like there's just like this rising fervor in the audience when this is happening. So he takes all of that, he starts his own fucking promotion just so he can continue to get that feeling from the crowd.
And in my research, what I also found is that injury was really, it had to change his trajectory. Obviously, he couldn't do his high flying style anymore. So he had to figure out another thing. So without having much options, he was like, oh, let me lean back into that spectacle that I learned when I was on excursion in the South, in the United States, in the South, in Memphis. And I think that's why he was like, let me do something wild. Let me, a wrestler, fight a legitimate karate champion. And so that's his first foray into spectacle, but it certainly will not be his last.
No, in fact, Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling's Summer Spectacular on August 4th, 1990, was the first exploding barbed wire death match between Atsushi Onita and Tarzan Goto.
So I don't know a ton about the storyline that was going on at the time, but here's basically what I was able to find is that FMW, the promotion, was built around the founder. And so Onita's go-to guy, right-hand man, is Tarzan Goto. And so I think he really didn't, in storyline, he really thought it was very disrespectful to the sport of wrestling for Onita to do these big spectacle matches where he would fight karate champions and stuff like that. And so I think he turned against Onita to get him back to what the idea of wrestling truly was about. And so that built to this exploding barbed wire death match that occurred at one of their, I guess the way they build their year is around 4 supercards. So they have the FMW anniversary show, which is their biggest event. Then they have the fall spectacular, the year-end spectacular, and the summer spectacular. The very first summer spectacular is also the very first exploding barbed wire death match between the founder of the company, Atsushi Onita, versus his longtime friend turned bitter enemy, Tarzan Goto. Samee, how did this match find you when you watched it?
This is the first match that I watched for the research. First of its kind in my heart. And they didn't make us wait too long before the first exploding wire. It was only 10 seconds, actually, after the bell rings. They
I
get
did
right onto
appreciate
it.
that, where I was like, oh, normally with these kinds of gimmick matches like barbed wire and stuff,
They
they
tease it.
really tease you. But man,
Yeah.
these guys they get into the action 10 seconds.
Outside of character, I feel like Atsushi was like, I have to see what the crowd is gonna do when I touch this. I have to see it. And so that's why he's the first person to go in the barbed wire so quickly. You know what I mean?
I think that's a great instinct too, as a performer, to just be like, let's just show them immediately. If they're into it, then great. If they're not into it, then let's figure something else out real quick. But
yeah.
I think as soon as he hits that barbed wire, and then you get that first this very first one, it feels a little bit like a bug zapper or something.
Sure.
So it's just these little tiny pops, but still the audience goes crazy. And I found myself also being like, oh, I jumped. I got very scared and very animated. And I don't know if you saw this, Samee, but what I was noticing in this very first one, I mean, it takes place in the 90s. So it has this sort of old school feel where it's a lot of guys muscling each other around the ring, jockeying for position, trying to get each other in submission holds and battling and doing all that kind of stuff. But it also seemed like, because this was the first of its kind and it was so sort of haphazard and sloppy, Onita ends up exploding himself 4 times just because he didn't have the ring awareness to know where the ropes were. And also, I mean, he had no context for what this was going to be like. Tarzan Goto pushes him into the ropes once, and then Onita, of his own volition, hits the ropes like 4 more times with no...
Yeah, so it was that first time, then he like immediately falls back into them right after the first time. So yeah, it's not a surprise that Onita is the only one who's like really going for it.
But it would also be little things like he would just like be on the ground, and then he would be trying to get up, and then his leg would touch the rope, and then it would like explode again. And you're just like, okay, Onita, I'm rooting for you, man. But like, how many times would you accidentally set off exploding barbed wire before you had the thought, hey, maybe this match just isn't for me?
I don't think it was an accident. This guy is a glutton for the attention. It's shocking that he's a Scorpio and not a Leo. Like, I think from that first reaction 10 seconds in when he touched it and he heard the people, a little bit of it was, testing it out. But once he heard everybody, I think all of the other times were absolutely on purpose.
And don't get me wrong, there were a few spots where it was very clearly he had to throw himself into the barbed wire to escape a hold. That's not what I'm talking about. There were other times where it seemed like he was on the ground and he was just trying to go from laying down to standing up, and he just didn't realize that his leg was a little bit more under the exploding barbed wire than perhaps he thought. And so just him doing like a normal stand up is sort of like, and he's like, and that one to me did not look like any part of the story.
Like
what it just looked like
calculated.
It didn't look calculated. To me, it looked like you're used to wrestling with normal ropes, and this is the first time you ever had to deal with the concept of, oh, these ropes will explode if I touch them. And so moving forward, I think he's way better about it. But this first one to me was just sort of like, man, you see, no joke, 15 explosions, and 10 of the 15 are Onita exploding himself.
Look, you know that thing about like not touching a hot stove? Like you learn that it's hot after touching it, and then you're not supposed to touch it again. But do you ever have those moments where those intrusive thoughts win and you just touch the stove even though you know it's hot and you're like, oh shit, it's hot?
No.
Okay, well, I think I have the same intrusive thoughts as Onita, maybe.
So you're saying you kind of understand Onita in a way that, and maybe it's a Scorpio thing. You understand Onita in a way that I just don't. I think what I was noticing, right? It's just like Onita, he goes into the barbed wire upwards 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He goes in so much. He blows up. He's really giving the people their money's worth in this first initial bout. And I think, Samee, you're totally right. I think he has a unbelievable connection to the crowd. And when he starts to get fired up and starts making his good guy babyface comeback, I felt it. I was like, oh, I get why this guy was a huge phenomenon in the 90s in Japan, because when he starts laying his offense into Tarzan, you really do feel the momentum shift. Like I could feel his energy, and then he just hits like a symphony of the most beautiful DDTs I've ever seen in a row. He's just like pasting Tarzan over and over and over again. He finally gives Tarzan a taste of his own medicine. He pushes him into the barbed wire and explodes. And I guess this first match was more of a last man standing type of deal. So instead of getting a pinfall, your opponent needs to be down for 10 seconds. So 10 seconds, Onita wins the very first exploding barbed wire death match.
That's so fucked up. Do you feel like they discussed Tarzan gets shocked once and then that's it? That's the end of the match?
Well, here's the thing. I really think you're probably onto something where you're like, I bet he's
I'm a
just
fucking
so
genius, dude.
addicted to kind of pushing the boundaries that I feel like maybe they had kind of only agreed to like, you push me in once and then I like push you in once. And then when he saw what a reaction the crowd was getting, I think it was like, we did the agreed upon pushing each other in 3 times. And then let me just find 7 other ways to make it happen because the audience is losing it for this. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think Onita is just kind of a ham. And so he realized he was going to get a massive reaction on that first one and then was just like, yeah, look, I know we agreed on 3, but I'm going to do 10.
Right. It's kind of that same thinking, right? Where you see when a wrestler sets up a table, but then they end up going through the table. So it's kind of like this whole entire type of match was Onita's idea. So he gets the brunt of it, and then Tarzan gets it like just once, and then it's game over.
And these two run it back a year later. They do another exploding barbed wire steel cage death match at their second year anniversary. And I think this one, to me, you could tell that they really knew that they had a hit on their hands because this match, the very first exploding barbed wire death match that we just talked about, it was kind of like an open air thing. It seemed like a smaller crowd, but this death match in the steel cage was in a huge stadium. The explosions were a lot more theatrical. You could see them a lot more. They would have little soot and burn marks on their back every time they got hit. And I think they knew how to do that dance with the audience of like teasing that an explosion was going to happen before they actually did it. So it really feels like that first one was just a little test pancake. And when they saw what a reaction they got, they're like, let's keep doing this. And so I think what we'll see in more subsequent exploding barbed wire death matches is they really lock it in and they really know how to play with it now that it's like a thing. But the first time, yeah, it was just a wild experiment that honestly I thought was pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, it was wild. It's funny to me that the second time around, they were both getting barbed wire shocked more. And then the match also ended up being only 5 minutes long. They're like,
Yeah,
all right,
dude.
that's enough.
Yeah, it was totally wild.
We mentioned that Atsushi spent some time and was mentored by Terry Funk. And in 1993, Atsushi finally books Terry to join him in a no rope exploding barbed wire time bomb death match. So the event is FMW's Gen 10 4th anniversary show, May 5th, 1993.
And as we said at the beginning of the episode, this is one of those matches where the match is on a 15-minute timer. So when the timer hits 0, the ring is rigged to explode, whether anybody's in it or not. So there is this looming countdown hanging over this entire grudge match where Onita, he's fighting his mentor in the promotion that he created in the style that his mentor taught him. And so this is a really beautiful, historic match that is just, I think a lot of people agree that this is one of, if not the greatest exploding barbed wire death matches. Sammy, how did you feel watching this?
Well, let me just get into the breakdown of it, and you'll see how it has affected me. So the official is dressed like an oven mitt, and Shredder kind of had a baby, and Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So Atsushi is the first person that's sent into the barbed wire after what I thought was a poetically long test of strength lockup. So it's Atsushi. He's with his mentor, Terry Funk. It's fucking Terry Funk, king of hardcore, king of death matches. And they really do spend, I don't know, maybe a minute and a half like doing the lockup, Terry sends Onita into the barbed wire so hard that he kind of hangs there in a way that suggests that if the ropes were there, that Onita would have flown out of the ring. So just with the force of impact and the way that Onita dangled, like, I don't know, you're drying clothes on a rack, and he's on shocking barbed wire, so it shocks. And then he kind of you can't like slide down like you do on ropes, like you do. I've never been in a ring before. Like we see wrestlers kind of slide down. So you kind of hit, you stay there, and then you have to peel yourself off, which is what we see Onita do. And Terry grabs Atsushi by the hair and tries to drag him face first into the barbed wire, but thankfully Atsushi gets out using a suplex.
Dude, this sequence was so crazy. He like Onita is down on all fours, and then Terry Funk like grabs him by his temples and is dragging him like a dog, like an animal, and he's just pulling his face closer and closer to this exploding barbed wire, and you're just watching like Onita really just like fighting and doing it. It's like he's gonna rip his freaking hair out. It's so nuts.
I think this face drag ends up being like the move, because we see it in another match that we'll cover later. So just that like face like struggle, gosh, they really tapped into what makes us fucking freak out, I think, because I was not okay when this is happening at all.
Yeah, and I think we can track it. So that very first one, I don't want to say sloppy, but it was sort of experimental. The action was a lot looser, and it was a lot more about blowing it up. Whereas this match, they've obviously like the explosions are way more theatrical. So now there's a lot of smoke. So that way you've got that hit where somebody hits, there's explosion, there's smoke, and then you get to see the reaction of somebody coming out of the smoke. So it really escalates it. But then you've got a master like Terry Funk in the ring, and he's so good at delaying. You know, we don't get that first explosion for 5-7 minutes. You know, half of the match is just them teasing when they're going to do it, which again I think plays into the psychology when you're a wrestling fan of being like, ooh, when's he going to go in? And so yeah, it was one of those things where when you watch Terry Funk do his thing, it's just like, oh yeah, this guy's a master, and he knows just how to play it, just how to stand to really cut that gunslinger silhouette when he's in the ring, where it really does just feel like, I don't know, Onita, you got your work cut out for you. You're fighting the king, dude.
Yeah, that's, oh my god, I can't with these two. So after watching a handful of these, obviously the game of a barbed wire exploding barbed wire death match is who can throw the other into the wire. And then after we kind of fall into that rhythm, we being the audience, after we fall into that rhythm, then the extra thrills come from when we get faked out. So there's this really beautiful reversal we get when Atsushi charges Terry, and Terry's like wobbling because almost like a drunken master, and he sidesteps right as Atsushi's coming at him, and he arm drags and just adds force to Atsushi going into the wire instead. It kind of feels like they're playing with the mechanics of peekaboo sometimes with wrestling and sometimes with ultraviolet wrestling. Because it's like, oh, I'm here.
I feel like it's one of the things, like you take it out of the realm of hardcore deathmatch wrestling. That's what magic is. That's what horror movies are.
That's what
it's just sort
humor
of
humor is, right? Surprise.
That's most humor. Yeah, it's just that animal brain part of like, and then you're like, oh yeah, I like that.
Oh yeah, this is very good. So that was one that I really loved. And then all of a sudden, a timer pops up on the screen, and we now have 5 minutes, and it starts counting down, and every second is punctuated with an alarm. And I, at this point, forgot that the ring was gonna fucking explode after 5 minutes.
It is an ominous vibe when that 5 minutes starts, because it's just, there's an alarm sounding, and it's like they ratchet up the speed, the intensity, everything.
Yes.
And so it really does raise the blood pressure of just like, and you're just watching guys fight for their lives, and you're like, this thing's gonna explode, and the ref is in like a bomb disposal suit. It really, really raises the blood pressure when you're watching these guys be like, oh shit, they start fighting each other.
They have both been battered so hard by then that yes, the alarm energizes them, but it doesn't seem like it's their adrenaline is enough. Like maybe their adrenaline leaked out with all of the fucking blood that they've spilt.
Yeah, they're both covered in
Just
blood.
covered, ripped to shreds, their clothes. So Terry gets desperate and pulls out some of his wrist bandage to choke Atsushi out, and the oven mitt, the referee, the oven mitt tries to stop him, so Terry punches him out too, and with 2 minutes left, 2 minutes, Atsushi finds the grit inside of himself and he starts power bombing Terry so hard. And someone out in the audience, or maybe it's a person tied in with the show, but they're banging what sounds to be a huge gong, but with pretty unceremoniously. It's not like with the seconds at all. It's just like random loud noises. So every second we get a then we get the
Bang, bang,
banging of
bang,
this
bang, bang, bang,
gong,
bang.
and then we have everybody fucking screaming, and then and then at 60 seconds left, a fucking air raid alarm goes off, and Terry is just he's out.
Like he's a wild animal at this point. It's so much so that like you're right. Onita has to put him down because Terry's gone crazy. He's attacking the referee, and you can see Onita being like, "This is fully gone nuts." So he power bombs Terry Funk, no joke, 6 times, knocks him the fuck out. Air raid sirens start going off, and you see Onita being like, "Oh shit!" He grabs the referee and just throws his ass out of the ring. Where you're like, I guess that's the safest way to get the ref out of harm's way. Is just being like,
right.
"You're not safe." Ah! And then you see this guy being like, "Oh!" Like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air style, just like, and then Onita, you can see it being like, "Oh fuck, oh fuck." The seconds are counting down. Onita slides out of the ring. And we've got like, 20 seconds left. He's like, he's safe.
He turns around with 12 seconds left because it dawns on him that his mentor, Terry Funk, is basically lying there near death, mere seconds before a ring is going to explode. So Onita rushes back into the ring and he tries to wake Terry up or try to get Terry to move, and he just ends up slapping Terry pretty hard in the face. And seeing this was a little wild because I'm like, okay, the adrenaline is pumping. He doesn't know like that he's hitting him so hard. He runs back into the ring. He starts to try to gather Terry up, and it looks like he can't get up. Terry's not fucking moving. So
we've got like seconds away from the ring blowing up.
Seconds away from blowing up. And Atsushi puts his body on Terry's to save him from whatever explosions are going to happen. And then
a huge fucking explosion goes off. Like fire, smoke, it's going like everywhere. And then like as the smoke clears, you see Onita just like crouching, holding, covering. And it's just, it's so beautiful to be like, these men were at odds, but he had to save his mentor.
And I am literally crying right now for real. Just like emotionally, I can't handle it. It's just so wild. Like, yes, we understand. We all understand that there's not actually explosives going off, but we've mentioned in the Terry episode that he has this really great way of connecting with the audience. And I think that Atsushi also has that, like, I don't know, magic sauce of being able to connect with the audience in such a way that we believe everything that they do. And so to see him run in and cover Terry's body just really got me incredibly emotional.
Yeah, and then it's like these men are like covered in sweat and blood, and as the smoke clears, you see Onita helps Terry Funk to his feet, and these guys just like stumble off into the sunset. It's incredible. It's truly incredible. It felt amazing.
It was beautiful. Did it live up to the hype, Michael? Yes, it did.
I think so, but I think this is what I was starting to uncover when we got into exploding barbed wire death matches, because I honestly thought that, it was I've seen death matches before. I've seen all kinds of, feels like beyond ultra violent things people have done to each other during wrestling matches that made me feel queasy, made me feel scared, made me feel excited, made me feel all kinds of things. But there's a real beauty to these specific kinds of matches where I really thought it was going to be about how much violence could somebody do to somebody else. But it was really just, I think this is why people like Onita are masters. People like Terry Funk are masters, where they're able to mix the violence with the performance and are able to take you on the ride. So it's never sensory overload. Like they really, I
Never
felt like I
sensory
was,
overload.
well, I felt like I was, I never, I felt like I never felt overwhelmed with the journey they were taking me on. I think I feel like I felt what I was supposed to feel when I was supposed to feel it. So when
Mm.
that explosion goes off at the very end, yeah, of course I had that, like, this is the craziest shit I've ever seen. I had that, but I was like, that's exactly the moment they wanted me to feel that. But before that, I feel like they got me hook, line, and sinker every step of the way.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where you take a step back and you're like, that was incredible. That was really cool. Like, these guys they are masters at this very, very fringe theater. Almost, it really felt like we were watching experimental theater or something like that. I'm just being like,
Oh,
these
yeah.
guys are doing stuff. They are experimenting with the form. They are breaking the rules. It felt very exciting to see.
A thought that I had watching this, or actually after watching this match, was I thought about how you love to take new people to wrestling and thinking about if this was the first match that somebody goes to. Especially with the like 1 second alarms. I just feel it would have been, you would have gotten a lifelong fan or somebody who never wanted to speak to you
Who
again.
would have had a panic attack and just gone catatonic and been like, why
Yeah.
did you take me to this? And be like, I thought it would have been fun. But no, I think I guess for me, it's like with alarms and then air raid sirens going off for 5 minutes straight and then
Yeah,
a
it's a
huge
lot.
explosion, I straight up would have had a panic attack if I had
Oh,
been at
yeah.
this live. That was
Yeah.
what I was. It was one of those moments where I think a lot of times when you see these types of matches, you do have that feeling of, I feel like if I had been there, this would have really been elevated. And I feel like this Terry Funk Onita match, so glad I wasn't there because I straight up would have freaked out. I would not have
Sure.
been able to handle the energy, the chaotic energy that was swirling around that arena, that open air arena. Oh my God.
Yeah, shit. Fuck. Anyways, this match in particular is available on YouTube. Again, it's a FMW Gen 10 4th anniversary show, May 5th, 1993. Check it out.
So I think it's one of those things. Like Onita he's the creator of this match. He popularized it. So he's been in a number of different big battles. But again, I wanted to explore the match type as well. And so I found this match. It's a women's exploding barbed wire death match. And I wanted to give it a shot. So this is also in Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling. It's at their 7th anniversary show, May 5th. 1996. So, as we said, 1989 to 1995 is Onita's first run with the promotion, but then he decides that, maybe he wants to get out of the game, much like Terry Funk. He's like, maybe I've done all I can do. I want to retire. Maybe I want to try doing movies or something that's less taxing on my body. So he has fully stepped away. And I think a lot of the people who came up with him are also starting to wind down their careers. So we are at the storyline context for this match is there were these two wrestlers, Combat Toyota and Megumi Kudo. And they were scouted specifically by Onita when they were all in the All Japan dojo together. And he basically
Oh.
was like, hey, come to FMW, see what you can do. So these two basically came in together as part of a 3-person team. And then throughout their entire careers, ran the gamut. They were friends, they were rivals, and sometimes they would be on the same page, sometimes they would be at odds. So Combat Toyota, she's been in the game for, I think, 10 years. And she's like, you know what? I think I got one more in me. So this match, this exploding barbed wire death match for the FMW women's title, this is going to be it. This is the match I retire on. And the question's going to become, is she going to retire as the champion or not? And so the person that is picked to fight her is her longtime friend, her longtime rival, Megumi Kudo. Going into the match, there is no question. It's basically like Combat Toyota cuts this very beautiful promo right before she goes out. And I guess, Samee, I got pictures of Combat Toyota and Megumi Kudo. And I guess it's just like, what do you see? What do you notice?
So Combat Toyota kind of looks like a David Bowie-esque character where there's this like grand gold collar that comes up behind her head, and she's got like an extreme cat eye eyeliner, and her hair is blonde on two sides and then red in the middle, so she looks like an epic cartoon character. And then Megumi, she just looks like a lady.
Yeah, and she's got like almost like a Power Rangers, like a pink and white jumpsuit on. And I think
Mhm.
the two presentations couldn't be any more different. So Combat Toyota, her whole deal is punk rock counterculture, whereas Megumi Kudo seems like it's a lot more cutesy presentation. But what I was noticing is don't let the presentations fool you, because these two are about getting so fucking violent that it's honestly scary. I have seen so many compilations of Megumi Kudo in death matches, and
Oh,
it's like
really?
she is fucking wild, dude. And that's not taking anything away from Combat Toyota, because she is like a heavy hitter so hard. And so these two, last match ever, it's going to be an exploding barbed wire death match. And Combat Toyota cuts this very melancholy promo up at the top where she's basically like, this is going to be a very emotional match for me. And I just hope that the fans can feel the love and the energy that I have. And the one thing that I've always noticed, and it's always been so intriguing to me, is when you look at hardcore deathmatch wrestlers, people like Mick Foley, people like Terry Funk, people like Combat Toyota, they all have this real eloquence to the kind of violence that they do. And it is so weird where it's like, why are you so poetic and also so tapped into darkness, like pure evil violence enacted on other people, but then also the poetry, the philosophy of somebody who would basically be like a pacifist. And it's always been such an interesting contradiction to see like Mick Foley give an interview where he speaks so beautifully about being set on fire, about being thrown into thumbtacks and bleeding and being so close to death. And it's just so sweet and soft spoken while he's doing it. And I don't know, it's always been like, damn, this is like performance art, you know, like I'm really watching performance artists work. And then this is just the avenue that they've wandered into, is this very violent performance art.
Yeah, I feel like maybe that balance isn't necessarily that they have like a light art and then like dark violence side. I feel like maybe the violence really isn't about doing it to another wrestler. It's all about the sacrifices that they're doing, putting their bodies on the line for their art. And the darkness is just it's not darkness, it's just violence. I don't know. I feel like the dark, like UFC, MMA, that's dark to me. Boxing is
Sure.
super dark to me. But this stuff is like, these are artists. These are planned to an extent. You can't plan how deep fucking barbed wire is going to go into your skin. But like, this is, rehearsed. This is choreographed. So this is sacrifice. And I feel like maybe that's the difference.
And I think that was, and again, I feel like the manic energy I had at the top of this episode, I feel like was coming because I was starting to have this breakthrough. The more of these that I watched, the more I was just like, I have pushed through the spectacle and I am just seeing beautiful performance. And it is just like, so I mean, here's a tip. If you have a wrestling promotion and you want to look for poets and philosophers, maybe start by looking at the people who are willing to do the craziest fucking shit you've ever seen in your life. And then those are maybe going to be the most soft spoken poets. You know?
Yeah, look out for Nick Gage's Book of Poetry coming in 2027.
Dude, I'd read it. So this match has an air. I mean, it's a retirement, right? It's a retirement match, but it has this air of melancholy to it, and it's the threat of it being a exploding barbed wire death match is also hanging over it. So it's totally wild. And Combat Toyota, she comes out to "Wild Thing" by Joan Jett, which is Onita's theme song. So even though Onita has left the promotion, they're still paying tribute to him by having Combat Toyota come out to his theme song. And we have Onita sitting at ringside watching this. And so all of this is still like, this is how big of a deal this guy was to this promotion at this time. Is he's not even in this match, and his specter is in every single fiber and every single aspect of it. And it really, this match is beautiful. And it's so incredible because it has that old school vibe in that Terry Funk Onita match that we were talking about, where you don't get that first barbed wire hit for, I want to say 10, 15 minutes. It's just them teasing it. And I will say the ring awareness on display between these two they are so good at teasing you and faking you out and almost hitting the ropes and getting so close Or having a thing where, I mean, Toyota does it 3 or 4 times where she steps back and then realizes she's about to step into the barbed wire and immediately jumps out of the way. And so they're so good at reminding you the danger is there before they ever fully present it. But once they do, dude, Megumi gets fucking drop kicked. So
No.
Toyota, she's got size on Megumi. Megumi's like a very petite person, and then Combat Toyota, she's a little bit bigger and more heavy set. So they have a little bit of that David Goliath feel. You watch Combat Toyota just fully up, 2 legs, drop kicks Megumi straight into the ropes, and she just goes like, bah! And it explodes. It's so wild. It's so crazy.
Fuck.
And then these two just start dead weight slamming each other on the ground. It's so wild. It's like pick up a sack of potatoes and then just fully throw it over your back, drop it on its head. It's so unbelievably brutal where it's just like you're watching both of these women land on their necks, land on their heads, getting slammed so hard. And then at a certain point, Megumi like kind of battles her way up, and then she sees Toyota like kind of wobbling by the ropes. So you see Megumi run all the way across the ring, almost straight into barbed wire, stop on a dime, turn, run back, and then just like flying back first sends them both into the barbed wire. It
Oh my God.
explodes again. And it's one of those things, like they don't slide down the ropes. So you just see like Toyota's just sitting there back against the ropes, fucking smoldering. And you're just like, oh my God. It is absolutely unreal. And so at that point, that's when the temperature changes. Megumi's able to like load up her finisher, like has to hit it several times in order to fully take Toyota out. But in the very end, Megumi is able to beat her longtime friend, longtime rival, longtime teammate, and become the FMW Women's Champion. And Combat Toyota is able to retire. And then, like a hardcore angel from hardcore heaven, Onita comes from the crowd and much like he does with Terry Funk, like pretty violently tries to wake up Combat Toyota, but she's just like fucking done. She's out. And so he ends up just throwing her over his shoulder and carrying her way to safety. If you have the time, I absolutely recommend this match. It is the 7th anniversary show, May 5th, 1996, Combat Toyota versus Megumi Kudo. This is also, I found it on YouTube. It's truly a beautiful match. It's unbelievable. I would highly recommend you watch it. So Samee, all of these
Michael.
matches, it sort of seems like the heyday of exploding barbed wire death matches was in the 90s, you know, all throughout the 90s, all throughout FMW. This is where it happened. And so I think they kind of just fell out of fashion. And that's where they became that, you know, that secretive boogeyman thing that I was talking about, is they really went underground and they were harder to see, harder to find. I mean, now with the internet and stuff, we have a lot of access to these matches, but it had been a really, really long time since anybody had seen an exploding barbed wire death match. And then in 2021, Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley decide to resurrect this match for a heated rivalry they had found themselves in.
Oh my goodness. When are we not talking about Kenny Omega or Jon Moxley on this podcast?
We love both of these guys, but I do think this specific match works really well with somebody like Jon Moxley, and especially the story of what was going on with him at the time. Because Jon Moxley used to be Dean Ambrose in the WWE. And so the storyline that was coming out was basically Jon Moxley left the WWE because at that time he was sick of what they were doing. And this guy, Jon Moxley, he cut his teeth at promotions like CZW. So he absolutely was a hardcore deathmatch style wrestler. Dog collar matches, barbed wire matches. He was into all that, bleeding, all that stuff. And so when he left the WWE, he kind of made it clear that he really wanted to get back to those violent roots. So the very first thing he did when he showed up in AEW was laid Kenny Omega the fuck out. And these two, it sent them on like a 2-year escalating rivalry where they were, you know, they were in matches, they were in hardcore matches, and the violence just kept ratcheting up and ratcheting up and ratcheting up. And by the time we get to December 2nd, 2020, Kenny Omega beats Jon Moxley to become the AEW World Champion. And Jon Moxley wants his revenge. But here's the thing. These guys have kind of done everything possible to each other. Everything possible except for one thing. It is a match that has not been done for like 30 years. An exploding barbed wire death match.
No fucking way. That's crazy. All right, so here is our little breakdown. Jon swaggers in from backstage and enters from the audience. Do you think this was a Shield callback, or COVID protocol because it is 2021.
Hey, little column A, little column B.
Fair enough. And so he's wearing a leather jacket in a actual nod to Atsushi Onita. Kenny comes in wearing a sleeveless tee, jeans, and the AEW World Championship title. And we haven't really seen, or at least I haven't really seen Kenny in the state of undress. Like, did he hit you differently?
Just from the few times I've seen barbed wire matches, death matches, inferno matches live, there is always a very specific outfit that you see people outside of their normal outfit. And a lot of times you'll see wrestlers obviously want to show off their physique, but whenever it's like a barbed wire match, they will always wear clothes. And I think what it is,
A leather jacket,
a
boots.
leather well, Moxley takes off his leather jacket, but when
Yeah.
Kenny comes out in a white t-shirt, it always does seem a little bit weird. But then as soon as he starts getting thrown into the barbed wire and you see the shirt rip, you see the shirt turn red, I think it really signals that you're like, oh, right. They thought about this. They want the blood to read more than it normally does. So I always think that kind of stuff is brilliant. But yeah, Kenny, we're used to seeing him in pants. So to see Kenny in a sleeveless white shirt and jeans, very bizarre.
Yeah, it was a little wild. I was like, we could have maybe styled him with a better t-shirt. That's all I'm saying. So let's talk about the ring a little bit. In the package played before the match, Kenny and Don Callis have orchestrated and built this whole ring. So when we pan to the ring, it's the barbed wire sides. Then we have two door-sized boards just rigged with barbed wire in two corners of the ring. There's one basically barbed wire table on the outside of the ring, along with a whole arsenal of barbed wired weapons. So we have a chair wrapped in barbed wire. We have a bat wrapped in barbed wire. Any toy they want, they have.
There's also a thing on the outside where it's sort of like a pallet where you see a huge barbed wire covered square, and the whole deal is if you hit it, it is also rigged to explode. Unlike a sort of traditional barbed wire death match, this one has just three sides of the ring are covered in barbed wire. So there's one rope that they can sort of bounce off of and get some of that traditional offense in. But then Sammy's right. They've just got every toy under the sun at their disposal. And as soon as the match starts, they get pretty active with those toys. But the other thing is, in a callback to FMW, to Onita and Terry Funk, this match is also a countdown 30-minute exploding barbed wire deathmatch, meaning no matter what happens, no matter who's in the ring, at the end of 30 minutes, the ring's going to blow.
You know, you just mentioned that they did that nod to Terry and Atsushi with the timed match of it all. And they start out with the classic, like, I'm going to grab your face and put it into this barbed wire. So it was fun to kind of, just link those up visually. Be like, oh, they're really, making it, giving a shout out to the goats. Much like the match between Toyota and Megumi, their big barbed wire moment happens after 16 minutes when Kenny tosses Moxley into the wires. Kenny also gets Jon into a figure 4 leg lock, and to retaliate, Jon grabs a barbed wire covered chair and saws it across Kenny's blue jeans. And I screamed.
The creativity with barbed wire is one of those things where I personally can only take so much, where you can only see somebody get thrown into it, and just watching them crash and burn, watching a person saw another person with legitimate barbed wire. That's always one of those things where you're just like, I'm a big fan of hardcore wrestling, but you guys, this is a bit much for me.
Yeah, I really didn't like it very much. And I was like, Jon, fucking relax.
But I did want to ask you this, Samee. So
Yeah.
as we said, this is taking place AEW, major promotion. They've got a lot more resources than those old school FMW matches. And so I was wondering, did the higher production value, how did that factor in? Because we saw those gritty old 90s exploding barbed wire death matches, but how did this modern presentation, this modern coverage feel? Did it feel good, or did it maybe feel too clean, too precise?
I'm happy that we kind of already just talked about like the the artfulness that we've felt with these matches so far, because with the grit and stuff, I don't know why I feel this way, but the grittiness of the other matches made it feel, I don't know if it's real, but it made it feel better. So
a little more plausible when you're watching it.
I guess so. So to see the ring beautifully like set up with barbed wire, then we have the pallet, then we have the doors, we have the barbed wire table. Like it kind of felt this is going to be so weird for me to say, but it kind of felt like cultural appropriation. Does it make sense? Like it kind of felt like
I was going to go a different way. I was going to say it felt a little corporate. It felt a little, whereas the other ones felt very counterculture, very punk rock, very real. This felt like Target being like, we do death matches too, you guys. You're like, yeah, it's just like really well lit and really well shot. And again, you're right. It's almost the way the ring ropes are wrapped. It's just a little too beautifully, artfully wrapped. Whereas when we were watching it in FMW, it was just sort of like, it's just this barbed wire there are no ropes. It's just barbed wire. It's just, you're going to watch people crash and burn when they go into it. Which also, again, I feel like that's making it sound like I'm low on the match. It was one of those things where just, I think the presentation felt a little wonky to me. But, dude, the violence that's happening in this match is pretty on par with everything else we've seen. I don't want to take anything away from those guys in the ring because they were bleeding for us. It was nuts.
Yeah, they went at it with an intensity that we haven't seen yet in the matches that we talk about in this episode. So, it's 2021. They now are wrestling with the beautiful intricacies that we're used to. They're robust moves. They're beautiful offensive moves, and then also highly dangerous barbed wire walls and weapons. So I don't want to take away from this match at all, so I won't. Kenny takes full advantage of the side of the ring that has just ropes instead of barbed wire, and he does a moonsault onto Jon, and he tries to get Jon into another leg lock, and Jon kicks Kenny into the barbed wire. And I feel like maybe this is the first big moment that Kenny gets barbed wired. It was the force of this kick was so much that Kenny bounced off like they were ropes, and Jon was ready with a massive drop kick and gets Kenny into the barbed wire again. So Kenny ends up getting like kind of like bookended by barbed wire in 10 seconds, which it's brutal, dude.
I think the second death match we watch is sort of on par with what the pops were, where they were, pretty decent sized explosions. But I think where we were at, we were a lot more used to those big theatrical smoky explosions. So I think these are pretty decent, like pop, 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 like fireworks going off. And it's pretty wild to see a thing that, like, I didn't think I would ever see this match, but to see it in a mainstream American promotion in 2021 is honestly unheard of. It was wild. The crowd is hooting and hollering. I mean, everybody's social distance, but you can hear lots of "this is awesome" chants. It's really revving people up. People are super excited.
And in the heat of the moment, Jon wraps a section of barbed wire around his fucking arm, like
how you would wrap an extension cord. He's just like boop, 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 boop.
Just like this, just like poorly wrapping an XLR cable. And then it seems like what he really wants to do is lariat Kenny Omega with his barbed wire arm, which, I don't know, Michael, wouldn't that decapitate Kenny Omega?
Yeah, but that's the thing. I'm pretty sure that Jon Moxley wants to kill Kenny Omega in this match.
It's fucking crazy. Thankfully, Kenny dodges all attempts of a lariat, and he ends up ramming Jon into the barbed wire, and the explosion seems to get Kenny in the eyes because he immediately turns around and asks the official for water to flush his eyes out. And it's like, okay, well, shit, is that real? Is everything okay? What's happening here? So Jon paradigm shifts Kenny into the barbed wire pallet that we talked about earlier. And even though Kenny lands on his head, Jon is the one that takes the brunt of this impact because we just watch him just stay just stay right on the barbed wire for quite some time while
Yeah,
we
so this is the
see.
part where they go out of the ring, right? Where they're like
Yeah,
on the ring apron, and so you watch Jon Moxley pick Kenny Omega up, and they fall 6 feet onto this whole pallet full of
onto barbed wire.
barbed wire boards, and it just like snaps, and Kenny mercifully lands on his head and rolls away, whereas Moxley just lands flat on his back, and he's just laying in like somebody lounging in a pool. It's like he's on a pool floaty, but
Yeah,
he's laying
totally.
in barbed wire. It's unbelievable. It's so nuts. And here's the thing we haven't been mentioning. In like 10 minutes, the ring's gonna explode.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
so all this is going on, but it's like there's just the looming threat of this huge explosion. And it's just like, hey boys, hey Mox, I know you're hurt laying in this barbed wire, but like you got
You
10 minutes, bro. No
gotta hurry
time to
up.
be hurt.
We've got stuff to do. Credits will roll in 10 minutes. So John gingerly starts trying to remove himself from the barbed wire pallet, and we see Kenny standing on the other side, and just blood is gushing from his forehead. And also, for the rest of the match, whenever you see the top of Kenny's head, you can see a hole. It's just a bloody hole from the fucking barbed wire, and I'm pretty sure it's from this spot right here. So once John finally gets up from the barbed wire pallet, he picks up a handful of the barbed wire and he rolls Kenny and himself back into the ring. And I started to feel really sick. I think this match got me closer to my limit than any of the other ones. Like with Sabu and Terry Funk, there's just a moment where there's a threshold, and I feel like with John grabbing the barbed wire, I'm like, oh, we are tiptoeing to a bad spot. And it
Yeah,
wasn't.
there's only so much barbed wire a human being can see before it's like, this is a bit much, John. Come on, man.
Yeah, because we know what he's gonna do with this barbed wire, and he starts doing it. He starts punching Kenny in the face with the barbed wire in his fist, which it is too much. And it's at this moment where we start hearing the ominous countdown sounds, and we have 10 minutes. And Kenny gets 2 V triggers out, and he gets John up in a one-winged angel, and Kenny pins him. But before we can get to 3, John puts his foot on the barbed wire to cause an explosion that breaks the fucking pin.
And there's like an extra bonus of like, yeah, he has to sacrifice his own leg just to be able to beat the count. But then it also sends like sparks and smoke into Kenny's face. And so it really is kind of a genius tactical move, but it's kind of harkening back to Onita and that very first exploding barbed wire death match where he's getting choked out and all he can do is leap into the barbed wire to escape the hold, but at a much greater physical toll.
So the Good Brothers run in and start beating on John. Can you let us all know who the Good Brothers are?
Yes. So it's a little bit of that complicated history that we were talking about. Again, we're going to do a much deeper dive on this run for Kenny Omega, but at this stretch of time, he's starting to branch out into other promotions. So the Good Brothers are at TNA Wrestling, which is not affiliated with AEW at all. But the connection they have is that Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers were all in the Bullet Club together in New Japan Wrestling. So Kenny is sort of combining this Frankenstein Bullet Club alliance full of people who are sympathetic to his cause. And this is going to help him become the belt collector. But that has nothing to do with the story we're telling right now. So all you need to know for this match is that the Good Brothers are on Team Kenny. So they come in and they just start whooping Jon Moxley's ass. And so while they're working him over, I think it's Carl Anderson hands Kenny Omega a baseball bat covered in barbed wire that's rigged to explode.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And my character arc has come full circle at this moment too.
So he hands Kenny Omega the exact thing Samee thought that this whole episode was about. Because Kenny Omega hits Moxley with it, it explodes, right? They beat him. They set up a chair long ways. And so then you see Kenny Omega hit the one-winged angel on the chair, and then he pins 1, 2, 3. He beats Jon Moxley, retains his title, but they're not done with Jon Moxley yet. That countdown clock is still ticking down, ticking down, ticking down. They take out handcuffs. They handcuff Mox's hands
So
behind his
mean.
back. They're working him over. They're beating his ass. And then you see them all starting to pose at, like, up on the apron, and they're just like dancing, and Mox is like bleeding. He's on the ground. He can't get up. And then we, like, that siren starts going off. We're down to that final stretch, that final minute. And then who should arrive but Jon Moxley's on again, off again, estranged friend, Eddie Kingston. He
Oh, wow.
pushes back Kenny and the Bullet Club. He runs into the ring, and he's trying to get Jon Moxley up. And it's like the seconds are counting down. And in a very reminiscent homage to Onita and Terry Funk, Eddie Kingston, he doesn't know what to do, so he throws his body over his estranged friend right as the countdown hits 0.
Close your eyes, Michael, and I will do an exact impersonation of what happens when the clock hits 0. You ready? Pop!
It's really unfortunate because
Yeah.
it's like at 4th of July sparklers go off, and you just see like pop, 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 and that's it. No smoke, no nothing.
No.
And then Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston are just laying on the ground, clutching each other, looking like just absolute assholes.
Yeah, it's a
Who
bummer.
looks like they're scared of sparklers. And here's the thing. This match was awesome. It was
rules.
brutal. It was intense. But you get to that end, and it is just such a flaccid, disappointing, like, oh man. And even the crowd, who have been rabid for this match the entire time, all start booing. Everybody's disappointing. And unfortunately, this match has become one of the more infamous moments in AEW history for being pretty anticlimactic and pretty disappointing. How did you feel after watching all of these death matches and then getting to this, this corporate death match that ends in a little sparkler light show? How did you feel?
Not super stoked. I'm trying to spin it in a way that I'm fine with it, but it really was like, it was so disappointing because we just came from, the original. And yeah, I wish it was more, but the match itself was so fucking cool, and you should check it out.
And the thing that really is a bummer is the entire match, they're like hyping it up. They're like, the ring will explode. You have never seen anything like this before. These men are never going to be the same after this. And you're like, unfortunately, it's because one of the biggest goofs in AEW history happens to two of the best wrestlers in AEW, two of my favorites. And so it's a real bummer.
Do you think it was a misfire?
100% a misfire. And then I listened to an interview with Kenny Omega. He's on, I believe it's Renee Paquette's podcast.
Oh, okay.
And she asked him about it. And so according to him, this is what happened. When they were testing the explosives earlier in the day, it had that sort of Onita look that we were used to. And he was like, if we had just done what happened at those rehearsals, it would have been great. But apparently, the person who rigged it all up, set it all up, was gone. And then, like, a new person who had never seen any of what they had set up before, who was on the team, came in and was just like, oh, hey, I have an idea that's going to make this even better.
No.
So he sort of last minute changed a bunch of stuff. And so, according to Kenny, within his change, there were misfires. So it was like he completely shifted the plan to what it was, and then also what he shifted it to also misfired. So there were like many elements of it fucking up. And Kenny was basically like, this is one of those things where when you're in the match, all we can do is focus on what we can control. And so I'm just assuming that everybody's gonna do everybody's gonna do their part, right? Because he's like, when I'm in a match, it's not just me, it's my opponent, it's the referee, it's the commentator, it's like all of us doing this. And so it's like, I'm putting my trust in the camera crew, in the lighting people, in the referee, like all of this stuff. And so it's like, all I could do was put my trust in the pyro team. And then the pyro team decided to kind of go off script. And I mean, we've both worked in behind the scenes production.
You never change it.
Unfortunately, I've been in a few positions where somebody came through very last minute and was like, we kind of just spent all day setting this up, and for no reason, you're completely flipping the script right before everybody's supposed to perform. Spoiler alert, it never works. It's never a good idea. Even if you're like, I don't know if this tech is totally satisfactory, it is better to do the tech you rehearsed than to do something fucking crazy that no one's rehearsed. It's never a good idea.
Fuck, that sucks. What a nightmare. I
Yeah.
hope that person has learned something, because they took something huge away from a lot of people.
Kenny obviously was very upset, very bummed out, and I think has sort of landed on exactly the feeling that you and I both have of everything up into that match was really awesome. And then if you're going to do a big spectacle's the point. So if you can't deliver on the spectacle, unfortunately, it's always going to tarnish it a little bit. So unfortunately, they resurrected this very cool, innovative match 20 years after they were popular. You like really dug deep, pulled something out of the annals of history. And unfortunately, everybody's going to have this association whenever they think of exploding barbed wire death matches. But Samee,
Yes.
that is our exploding barbed wire deathmatch episode. We've gone through it all. We've been through the history. We've seen the highs, the lows. How did you feel experiencing it all?
I mean, just rewind back to the top of this episode and hear how messy and discombobulated we are. If you're going to watch these matches, which I really think that you should, don't watch them all in a row.
Yeah, definitely don't binge them like we did, because I cannot tell you. I'm in an existential place right now where I'm just like, what is beauty? What is reality? It's all a delicate dance. It's like, dude, I need to ground myself. I need to just stare at a wall for a while. I need to just totally cool off, because it's sort of those things. I think they're a rare treat, but definitely don't overindulge. Definitely show some temperance when you're experiencing an exploding barbed wire deathmatch, because I think, honestly, they're a little bit misunderstood.
I think so too, yeah.
I had them in the category of gory spectacle, and there's definitely gore, there's definitely spectacle, but I think there's a lot more beauty and artistry than I had initially thought. And it really was, if you look at wrestling as an art form, some kind of theater, it's like we really were checking out some of the fringe experimental theater where you just have people who are determined to push the envelope. And just because it doesn't look like what you're used to, it still has a lot of really interesting and unique things to offer the art form as a whole. So I think it's a really good treat. Definitely not something I personally can indulge in for a week straight, but I think it's definitely we definitely did, and it came at a psychological cost, I will say. But again, I think they're very misunderstood. I found them to be a lot artsy and a lot more beautiful in the way that violent choreography can be beautiful, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. Do you have a favorite out of the ones that we watched?
Oh, hands down, Terry Funk and Onita. That just had everything I was looking for. It had the spectacle, it had the storytelling, it had the character. It really had it. And I think they also knew how to take you on that roller coaster ride of when to get the barbed wire involved, when to get the explosions involved, when to escalate, when to pull back, when to just pull the ripcord and go for it. And then it has the very beautiful what AEW Revolution was trying to have. It has it. And so you get that. I think that's what made the AEW match so disappointing, is you got to see what it looks like when they nail it, when that explosion goes off and there's smoke and it's all billowing and stuff like that. And then you get to watch these two guys stumble away while the most 80s guitars are playing. And it's just like, and these guys are stumbling into the sunset, and it just feels like you watched an 80s action movie, and it's great. And I think it just makes the AEW one a bummer, because it's like, I know what it looks like when they nail it, and unfortunately AEW did not nail it.
Yeah, and there's also the thing of we both love Kenny and Jon Moxley, and they both have their special charisma, but I don't think either of them have the type of connection that Terry and Atsushi do.
I agree. Or they have a different kind of charisma, where I connect with them is not necessarily in matches like this. I appreciate them going for it, and I think they really delivered. But when you're watching the Masters, Terry Funk and Onita going for it, you really just have that, oh, I'm in your hands, guys.
Your heart
you guys
is
are
there, yeah.
You guys are nailing this. What about you? What was your favorite?
Terry and Onita for sure. There's heart in it, and then there's that barbed wire edging. Yeah, I think that one just head and shoulders above the other matches for sure. I do want to treat everybody with my final FMW type match. Are you ready for it, Michael?
Yeah, please.
A wrecking ball match. So there's a wrecking ball that is swinging in the middle of the ring. And the way to win is to be the first person to clamber up into the truck and turn it off.
Unbelievable.
Well, everybody, that was our unbelievable episode on exploding barbed wire death matches. Thank you for listening to Wrestling Academy that is hosted, produced, and edited by Michael Classic and me, Samee Junio. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Wrestling Academy Pod and send us an email at wrestlingacademypod@gmail.com.
You can follow, rate, and leave us a positive review wherever you get your podcasts, but check out Spotify where we have Q&As and polls for every single episode. And please, pretty please, hit that subscribe button, get us to 1K so Samee could put me through an exploding barbed wire table for real.
Oh my God!
That's good. No, it'll be a normal, traditional table, but Samee really will put me through it, but only if you subscribe, so please do.
All right, everyone. Class is dismissed.
Boo, 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 boo.